All right, welcome to another episode of the Hunt Suburbia podcast. And today I am joined by Toby Leary from Cape Cod Gunworks.
Cape Gunworks, yep.
Cape Gunworks. So Toby is a hunter. He owns a gun shop. What else do you do, Toby? If you can just run through some of your, what you do day to day, and
Yeah.
we'll let everybody know who you are.
Yeah, so I have a gun store here in Hyannis with an indoor shooting range. We have a big pro shop. We do a lot of firearms training. We do a lot of retail sales, and we also have the range that people can come shoot at. You don't have to be a member. We're one of the few public ranges, indoor public ranges in the state. Then I also have a podcast of my own called Rapid Fire, where we talk about basically all things guns, freedom, Second Amendment, and self-defense on a weekly basis. That airs every Wednesday from 4 to 6 p.m. And I do a radio show on Sunday on my local radio show station, WXTK 95.1, from noon to 1 p.m. So we're talking about guns and hunting and freedom and the Second Amendment on a weekly basis.
So with that being your list of credits, I mean, this you must have been in on this from the beginning, deep diving in on H.4885, the bill that's up to be passed in legislation here that would seriously affect all of our 2A rights. And I wanted to just basically put this out. It's a little bit late, later than I would have liked to have done it, but put this out as a PSA to all the hunters in the state. And even if you're not a hunter, maybe this will get shared around, but what this bill could mean for our Second Amendment rights, and why it's necessary to fight it and how we can go about doing that. And if you could just start out and kind of give the cliff notes on what this bill would do to our Second Amendment rights here in Massachusetts, I think that'd be great. And then we'll go into how to actually go in and take some action against the bill.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. And thanks for having me on, Patrick. I didn't know about your podcast. Sorry about that. But I'm going to be a follower now because I love the concept of hunting in suburbia. If we really rewind the tape, like 30 years ago, I was one of the directors of the Mass Bow Hunters Association. I was an area rep for Cape Cod and the islands, and so I dabbled with that whole concept of demonstrating how to hunt in urban or suburban areas where there's houses everywhere, but there's also deer everywhere, and
yes,
and they get pretty big. So I love that. And but anyway, I digress. So yes, you were right. About a year ago, the legislature dropped a bill called HD 4420. About a week after they finished and concluded their listening tour. So the state conducted a 11-stop listening tour, and I use the air quotes because they weren't listening to anything anybody said other than the people in their own echo chamber, and it was headed up by Chairman Mike Day of Stoneham, Massachusetts, and he's the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. And basically, he made 11 stops along the way and said, nothing's on the table. We just want to modernize our gun laws, and we're here to listen to you. So I was actually one of the panelists on that. I forget which stop it was, like the 7th or 8th stop in Greenfield. And which is a big hunting area. It's a rural area. And that's where I would say they chose to selectively have the true pro 2A advocates come and give their pitch as to why this is a bad idea to further gun control. And so while I was there, it was very engaging. The people were out in force. There was a couple, the Moms Demand Action crowd that really were like, no more guns, no more, we got to pass all these new laws. And we articulated why this is bad for freedom, bad for society, bad for the Constitution, bad for the citizens of Massachusetts. And then there was an overwhelming public comment, probably for an hour and a half, of people standing up and frustrated that every time the state's solution to violence or to any type of issue with a firearm that's by an evil person or a psycho or someone who's trying to kill people, they lay the blame at the people who aren't responsible. And
Hmm.
so they had heard enough. They said, not one more inch. And if you want to have a conversation about how to make our cities and our neighborhoods safer, we're on board. But it isn't at the expense of our enumerated rights. It isn't at the expense of giving up our freedoms or trying to say that this gun is important, but this one isn't. Like, that's not the conversation that needs to happen. The conversation is, what are we doing about mental health? What are we doing about uh, criminals who are oftentimes just cut and released and released on their own personal recognizance? And oftentimes the gun charge is the first charge dismissed because that carries a 1.5 year mandatory minimum sentence. So they don't want to put anyone in jail anymore. So what they do is they just plea bargain that part of it out and pin them with the fentanyl charge or the drug trafficking or the domestic or the assault and battery or whatever. But the gun charge is the first thing to get dismissed. And really, they always blame the people who aren't responsible. So anyway, fast forward about a year from when the bill was first introduced in July of 23, until it passed in July of 24. A lot happened. We were shouting from the rooftops how bad of a bill this was. I testified before the State House, and basically, it was almost futile. Like the ears were open, but the mind was closed, as the saying goes. They weren't going to at all listen to anything we had to say because they really need the narrative that the streets are violent and therefore we need to take away your gun freedoms and my gun freedoms. B, they have no resolve to actually lock up bad people. And C, it's their ultimate goal to basically disarm everybody in the state and ultimately in the country, because they say that Massachusetts is the test case. They really want to be the example for the rest of the country to follow. So I
That's a
get,
scary thought.
yeah. And I get people every day on social media say, what are you doing in Massachusetts? Just leave. Move to New Hampshire, move to Tennessee, move to Texas, move to Florida, wherever it is. But the truth of the matter is, if we don't stay and fight where the fight is, then guess what? This thing
Yeah.
has it spreads like a disease. Like Maine just passed a bunch of gun control laws in the wake of that horrible shooting that happened over the past year. And the truth of the matter is, if we cede Massachusetts and New York and California and all these areas, New Jersey, even Connecticut and Vermont, Connecticut and Rhode Island, then who's left to fight if everybody just cuts and runs? Number one, and what are you going to do about it when it comes to your free state? So that's why we're here putting on the fight in Massachusetts, and so yeah, that's been the last year of my life, has been fighting this unconstitutional
Yeah.
abomination that passed.
It seems like, and this is it's counterintuitive as a lot of this stuff seems to be. But if they're going to drop gun charges right now on the criminals, right, when they make an arrest and they're trying to prosecute, they drop those gun charges, like you said. It would seem that a bill like this, with all of the, there's so much verbiage in there. Even just reading a summary, there's a lot to go over. But it would seem like they're going to have a lot more cases to if this passes, they would have a lot more cases to prosecute. And it just seems counterintuitive if they're dropping those gun charges the first thing. Well, they're going to have a lot more to drop. Or do you think if this ends up getting passed, they're going to try to, like you said, make an example of the law-abiding citizens, the hunters, the youth that come in here from out of state and want to hunt? Which, if this passes, they wouldn't be able to do that. If you're under 18, I don't know. It just seems counterintuitive to me, and I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that you're over the target, and that is, if there's no resolve to put people away for gun charges, what's the point of making gun charges more, a punishment or a penalty for them higher or more. Uh, what they're really showing is the belly of the beast, which is they don't care about the criminal element because that helps them with their emotional argument to the people who aren't paying attention. They really want to jam up people like you and I because A, lawful people who run afoul of this type of lawfare is it makes us a prohibited person. So that means one less person can exercise the right to keep and bear arms, which is the ultimate goal. And number two, they uh, they have no intention of applying any of this to the criminal element because the criminals don't follow the laws as it is. A lot of the law is two pronged. One is yes, there's a legal component to it that is going to sting. It's going to hurt. It's going to cost us to have to fight for our innocence if we get jammed up with it. But secondly, it's kind of like what Maura Healey did in 2016 with the quote unquote assault weapons ban that she redefined, she reinterpreted, she basically wrote new law, and then she gave it to her enforcement agencies to carry out or at least threaten. And so it's basically law by threatening action. And most of the people of the state of Massachusetts complied just under the threat of not wanting to run afoul of the law. So there's this whole component where people are like, dang, like, can I still own this gun or that gun? And good people who aren't the problem are going to ultimately surrender their right or allow their right to be surrendered or just slip. Rights will be incrementally taken away by the threat of government violence against them, right? That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so they'll do it because they don't want to get jammed up. And so whether or not anyone ever gets charged is kind of irrelevant. The threat of being charged is almost as good as being charged. And that's been the way it's worked for the last 7 years in this state. So, or 8 years, really.
And it almost, I'm sure I see the chatter on social media. People are DMing me, messaging me on social media all the time about this. I run a hunting event, Hunt Stock. It's a festival for hunters to just get together and have fun and celebrate our pastime. And I've had so many people from New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, just saying, have you ever thought about, like, you should move it out of that state? That state is obviously doesn't care about 2A. Go to a more gun-friendly state and host your event. And there's a lot of that happening. At the same time, I think there's people who have already probably moved out of the state or are making plans to move out of the state just because of this being as a threat to be on the docket as a law, right? So that's touching on what you were talking about. Do you think that might be part of why they're floating, passing this law is because they kind of want to force out some guys like you or me or some of the hunters to move to other states because then they get more power.
If they weren't intending to do that, you would ask yourself, well, what are you doing then? Because that's the net result. We talk about it a lot on my show, but in 1998, there was 1.2 million gun owners in Massachusetts. Right now, there's 600,000. So there's already half the amount there was in 1998. But ironically, that's when they passed the last big omnibus or big tranche of gun control was in 1998. And since then, gun or crime in general, violent crime in Massachusetts is up 120% with half the amount of gun owners. And so, yes, there's this huge exodus of people leaving the state. I think the number is right around 1,000 people per week are leaving the state. And they're just like fed up with everything, but certainly an infringement upon their freedoms is one of the big sticky wickets why it's the straw that breaks the camel's back and they leave. You would think that's counterintuitive to what the state needs right now. We're facing billions of dollars in deficits, and you'd think, like, we don't want good people who are holding jobs or running businesses or raising families to be leaving our state. What can we do to hold them here? And in fact, Maura Healey has impaneled this group of people. A lot of them are legislators and outside, non-government agents, but to hold a symposium or a panel on what they can do to cause this stop in people leaving the state. But then you look at the actions of Bud Williams and Carlos Gonzalez, the representative, the House, the state reps out in Springfield and western part of the state, where Smith and Wesson was. They actually introduced legislation that would ban the manufacture of any gun in this state that couldn't legally be sold in this state. So that's really what sent Troy Industries and Smith and Wesson out of the state. They're like, we can't risk 50% of our business being taken away. And they do a victory lap. They say they're stood up to Smith and Wesson. And it's like, yeah, you cost 2,500 daily, hourly jobs in a part of the state that is suffering and needs those jobs. And that's what you did. And they're proud of it. It's unbelievable that people could say, I cost 2,000 jobs in my own district, but they're saying it's a victory lap because they took on Smith and Wesson. It's mind-boggling.
They cost jobs, they lost tax revenue, just a whole litany of things. And then you can even see it in the hunting space too. I think last year was the first year in Massachusetts history that bow hunting harvests eclipsed the gun hunting harvests. And that's just probably all because of that. If you go back to that 1998 bill that was passed, that last legislation, if you looked at the graph, it's the gun harvests just going downhill, and it's a trend also with new hunters in Massachusetts. So we're already fighting for hunters' rights. But let's talk about this bill a little bit more. And if you could just do us a favor and go over some of the points in this bill that would affect hunters the most.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize that, I had a guy come in the other day who's a lawyer. He works for the state of Massachusetts in public affairs. He's been a lifetime hunter. He's had an FID card since the 70s. And when it used to say valid for life unless suspended or revoked, but he was like, now I got to go get my LTC. This is crazy. All I want to do is go out and shoot ducks and deer with my semi-automatic shotgun. Well, now you can no longer own a semi-automatic shotgun with an FID card. You have to get a license to carry. Same thing for a Ruger 1022, semi-automatic rifle. You can't own any semi-automatic rifle or shotgun unless you have a license to carry. So there's been people that have never bothered to get their license to carry. They had no interest in purchasing a pistol or one of the scary assault weapons that the state likes to tout. But now they have to go out and reapply. These are people who've been background checked. They've paid a fee to take a class. They've been fingerprinted, photographed. They've done state, local, and federal background checks every time they've bought a firearm or when they renew their license. And they've owned guns for their entire adult life, and they've had their FID card for their entire adult life. Now they could be looked at as a felon in the eyes of the state for doing nothing other than waking up on October 24th and not applying for a license to carry and owning a gun that they say you can no longer own. That's number one. That affects a huge amount of hunters in this state. We also have, if you're 18 to 20 years old, you can no longer own a semi-automatic shotgun or rifle, period. You can't get your license to carry in the state until you're 21. So therefore, you will no longer be able to hunt you won't be able to purchase a Remington 1100 shotgun for deer season or duck season or pheasant or whatever you're doing with it. And the same goes for anyone under 18. You can no longer hunt with a semi-automatic shotgun, which is mind-boggling because those of us who hunt with shotgun know that a semi-automatic shotgun is easier to absorb the recoil from, say, a 12 gauge or a 20 gauge shotgun for a younger person than a pump action or a single shot that you're getting the full brunt of the recoil from. My daughter killed her first deer at 9 years old with a Remington 1100 20 gauge slug gun. And I probably wouldn't have let her take that shot if it was in my Thompson Pro Hunter, because the full bore of recoil from that would have been too much for her at 9 years old. So it got my children hunting earlier at an earlier age. And, now she's 15 and has uh, you know, plans we were going to get a Benelli Monfeltro 20 gauge for her to take bird hunting and turkey hunting. And now the state is saying that she can't hunt with that gun. And think about the solution in search of a problem. What are the implications of these laws that I just outlined? It's that after a 15-year-old is done in the turkey woods, they're going down to the streets of Brockton or Boston or, and shooting up and none of that has ever happened, right? We know that's not the problem. The kids that are hunting these days are not the ones you need to worry about. They're disciplined, they've been raised right, they've gone to hunter safety, they're doing everything by the book. And what is the problem with them hunting with a semi-automatic shotgun? What is the problem you're trying to fix? There isn't one, right? So there's this whole malum prohibitum, which is a law that is passed and makes it illegal because we say so. That's all it is. It's just people on Beacon Hill conjuring up ways to violate our right to keep and bear arms. And they say it's illegal because they say so. Nothing in the Constitution provides them with the authority or the privilege to do that, but they do it anyway in violation of their oath of office. And, I have people from Alberta, Canada, messaging us on Facebook and on our YouTube channel and whatnot saying, I have this duck hunt planned this winter. Can I bring my Benelli Super Black Eagle down to go duck hunting? I'm hunting sea ducks. And I'm like, under this new law, no, you can't. And again, what are the implications of this? We're costing people money if they cancel their trip. We're causing lost revenue to the state of Massachusetts for hotels and meals and restaurants and not to mention the outfitter that's providing that service to them. And all for what? There's no end game here. There's no net positive for society. So those are just a few of the things. I know that I know there's also some restrictions on muzzle loaders as well if they take any modern component like a primer.
Primer, yeah.
Yep. And ironically, the shotgun primer was invented prior to the definition of a antique rifle in 1899. So you might be hunting with a gun that takes a modern shotgun 209 primer, and I use those words loosely as well, modern.
Yeah.
That shotgun primer was invented in the 1800s.
Yeah.
So, again, what are we fixing here? What problem have we just solved by making it impossible for people who don't possess an FID card or a license to carry to go muzzleloader hunting? So it doesn't make any sense. But those are some of the highlights or the top level things. But this bill is 116 pages long. There's nobody that's unaffected by this bill. It affects everybody, whether you're just a sportsman or whether you're a trap and skeet guy or whether you're the muzzleloader hunter or whether you're want to own a gun for self-defense. It really it checks every box and affects every aspect of gun ownership in the state of Massachusetts. The whole 18 to 20-year-old thing has already been ruled on in several district courts and circuit court of appeals throughout the country. I suspect that whole argument will be taken up by the Supreme Court this year in this term. So we could see that go away and become mooted before this law even goes, the full, it gets challenged locally.
Has the time already passed where this could be, they could carve out different sections or add in wording to protect hunters or carve out different clauses? Is that time already passed? Like, in other words, the bill that they're going to be voting on into law, is it set in stone the way it is right now, regardless if we get the 50,000 signatures or not?
Yeah, so this bill has been passed. This is already in. It's set to become law on October 23rd.
Yeah.
Or Healy signed it on July 23rd. And so the only way we can make this go away is if we do rescind it and get it put on the ballot by getting these 50,000 signatures by October 7th is really the drop dead date. So we have 2 weeks left to get this done. But ironically, the state just put a carve out in it for themselves because they knew there's no funding for this bill. This bill is an unfunded mandate. When they passed it in the House, the first thing they had to do was suspend, I believe it was Rule 10, which prevented them from passing an unfunded mandate. So they simply suspended the rule that prevented them from passing a bill like this so that they could pass the bill as an unfunded mandate. And now this ticking time bomb is starting to wear on them. And they've tasked the state police to come up with a new curriculum, to come up with guidelines for instructors, to come up with the test requirement, to come up with what the pass-fail grade is, all this stuff. The state police hasn't been given a dime by the legislature to do all this. And they probably pushed back and said, hey, where are we getting the money, the staff, and the infrastructure to do what you passed? So what they did was last week in a budget bill, they amended it and gave themselves another 18 months. So if this was such a dire need that blood was going to run in the streets if we don't do something and act, then why do they give themselves 18 months to hash out the funding and the details of what that licensing requirement is going to be? It just proves that this is a solution in search of a problem. It proves that this was virtue signaling. It proves that they were trying to just throw a little temper tantrum in response to the Bruin decision that came out of the Supreme Court in 2022, which took away discretionary licensing from the state police or from the local police. And the legislature didn't like that. So they threw a little temper tantrum and passed this omnibus bill, even though it was unfunded. It was not well thought out. It is impossible to enforce. And it's also impossible to implement because there's no mechanism for these portals and gun registration and licensing and reporting requirements and all this stuff. So they just carved out some extra time for them to work on their parts, but they're still saying to you and I, hey, you better comply with this on October 24th or else.
What do you want from your trail cameras? I know what I want. You basically just want to make sure that if a buck walks in front of it, the camera is capturing it, plain and simple, right? And with cell cameras, you want to make sure that after it captures it, it's getting sent to you and it's not getting hung up somewhere, and you don't have to worry about, oh, did you format the SD card the right way, or did you use the right SIM card with the right cellular network, or what did you do that is making this image get caught up? With Moultrie Mobile, you don't have to worry about that. I've been using Moultrie Mobile cell cams for 5 years now. The ones that I bought 5 years ago are still working. They're outdated now, but they're still working. But this year I'm running 20 Moultrie Edge 2 Pro cell cams, and I know when I put that into a tree, it is giving me the confidence that it's working. And there's brands out there where you just don't know, and you don't have the confidence when it's up in a tree, and then you have to talk to customer service, and you have to go through a whole line of troubleshooting items. With the Moultrie mobile cameras, they make it super simple. They have an auto connect feature, which will find the strongest cell signal around from the 4 major networks and automatically connect to that, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to install a SIM card. You don't have to bring an SD card and format it. Everything is built into the camera. The technology is all built into it, and that leads to a reliable camera that I can be confident in. And if you guys are looking for the right cell cam, if you already run cell cameras, you run different brands, I recommend getting a couple of these Moultrie Edge 2 Pros or any of the Edge 2 cell cams in that series, and just give them a shot. Run them against the other cameras that you have, and you will you'll be happy with the results. So go check them out. Don't just capture images, gather intelligence with the Moultrie Mobile Edge 2 camera series paired with the super simple and easy to use Moultrie Mobile app. You can learn more at moultrieproducts.com.
Yeah, they're making us scramble, and there's a lot of just uncertainty. And I mean, I don't know nearly as much about it as I should, and I'm sure that's the case with most. Most people don't pay a lot of attention to politics. They just don't. Especially, hunters like to go about their business and keep to themselves, and that's a detriment sometimes. And that's why I wanted to have you on here so that we can rally up some support and educate people on it. But yeah, I mean, that's what are some of the things. What are some of the things storage wise? Like, are there things in this bill that will change the way that we have to store our weapons? I know I read something that even owning, black powder or owning components of a muzzleloader, even if you don't have a muzzleloader, folks who have never had a shotgun or never even had been required to have an FID before, all of those folks are now going to have to go out and get an LTC. And is there, the way the bill is written, is there any grace period once October 24th starts? If you have submitted or applied for an LTC, are you able to still hold on to your weapon for 90 days or whatever? Like, how is all of that even going to, how will that be enforced?
Right.
On October 24th?
That's a great question. And it's something that this law does not address. So basically, they just say simply, you can't possess it. I don't know.
Where does it go while they're waiting to get their LTC?
To it? What am I required to do? And what about all the people? Like you said, I'm a hunter myself, and I know for years, sometimes I'd be paying attention and looking at, maybe on election years, what's going on. But for the most part, you hit the nail on the head. We're people that want to be left alone. We want to go sit in our tree stand. We want to wait for the buck of our dreams to walk by and put some food on the table and, provide for our families. We're hard workers. We're family people. We go to, do our thing, right? And we're not paying attention to all the little nuance that happens. And unfortunately, a lot of hunters don't even vote. They're not even registered to vote. And they're not paying attention politically because, it's just not the way they're wired. And I get it. We have more important things to do. But unfortunately, the world is run by those who show up. And we end up staying home or going hunting on election day. And what happens is things like this pass, and the people who pass them continually get elected. And there's a huge amount of people that are gun owners that don't vote, that are, very good people that just don't think that their voice matters, don't think their vote counts for anything. And I understand all that. But what I would say is one of the things that's very encouraging for me since we've started this campaign a month or so ago, or really only a month into it after this passed, was so many people are saying, you know what, I'm going to register to vote so that I can sign this petition. And they are now seeing that there's something that they can do that actually has teeth to it, that actually matters, that actually can change some things. And there's 600,000 gun owners in this state. We need 50,000 certified signatures. That should be a chip shot. That should be like that should be an easy ask. That should have been done in the first weekend or two, right? But here we are. We're still not at the number, and we're making good progress. But really, what could happen if tens of thousands of people, especially in some of those rural areas in Massachusetts, that get 800 or 900 people out to vote on election day, if another 100 people come out and vote, you'll swing elections. You'll change the makeup of the legislature. And that it's little incremental changes over time that are going to make a big deal in the grand scheme of things. And also holding the politicians accountable in the primaries and on election day is one of the best ways for them to think twice about voting our rights away. If they get to go home and spend more time with their family on November 6th, and they don't get to go back to the State House in Boston, and that's their $175,000 a year job, they're going to be like, wow, I really screwed up. And so people going out and registering to vote and voting is paramount. We can no longer sit idly by. We can no longer just hope somebody else comes and saves us, whether it be in the courts or the NRA or the Firearms Policy Coalition rides over the hill at sundown and saves us from the evil villain. Those days are over. We have to work on this ourselves. This is a grassroots effort from every corner of the state. Fishermen, hunters, sportsmen, outdoorsmen. How about just people that don't care about owning a gun or not, but are
care about the Constitution?
Right. The basic Constitution.
Yeah.
And so, if politicians can go into their chambers and they can violate their oath of office and vote to infringe the Second Amendment, even though there's no provision in the Constitution that allows them to do that, they are acting outside of their constitutional limitations of authority, but they do it anyway. That's by definition abuse of power. And we don't hold them accountable for that. Forget about the First Amendment. Forget about the Fourth Amendment. Forget about the Fifth Amendment. We already have conceded it. The only thing that's holding tyranny into check right now, the only tyranny check relief valve is the Second Amendment. Once that's gone, they'll mull right over us. Why do you think Thomas Gage, at the behest of King George III, ordered his redcoats to go march on Lexington and Concord? Because they wanted to round up the guns, the primers, the shot, the powder, and take away the firearms from the villagers there and the patriots and the residents of Massachusetts, because they had plans for them that they wouldn't have gone along with otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where we're at now, nearly 250 years later, 248 years later. But it's amazing that we've let it come this far. And I would say that we suffer from something called Stockholm Syndrome. We have got so used to asking permission of our oppressors that we become sympathetic to the oppressor. And that's where we sit after 40, 50, 60 years of gun control laws being foisted upon us and forced down our throat. We just adjust and comply. And we do it because we want to be able to exercise our rights, and we don't want to be, considered a felon or considered a, prohibited person. And we just comply year after year. And then we send them back to the State House to rinse and repeat. But I think a lot of people have woke up and they've gone too far. They've really addressed every area of this fight. They've united gun owners throughout the state. They realize it's not just your grandfather's assault weapons ban anymore. This really addresses each and everything, from being able to buy ammunition in the mail, from being able to take your kid hunting, to having your family drive up from out of state and hunt with you. This really affects everybody. And if we don't get involved, if we don't activate now, then when? This is the time. And if it isn't going to be us, then who is it going to be? Nobody cares as much about this as us. And if we don't care enough to get involved, then we might as well just raise the white flag now, because that's the way it's going to go down.
Yeah. And if there's a silver lining in this, which I always try to find a silver lining, it is that this is the wake-up call. This is where we all need to rally behind it. And if it's going to actually, because you need to be a registered voter to sign this petition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it gets, let's even say another 5,000-10,000 people to go and register to vote just to sign this petition, hopefully that converts to a lot more votes at the ballot box. And like you said, we can start to swing some elections, and so that's the silver lining. I see that. Let's talk about how people can go and sign these petitions. There's a website, fightbackma.org.
Yep.
That has all of the places. So these petitions are in how many businesses across Massachusetts?
Right now, we're in about 85 businesses throughout the state, not to mention some one-day signing events that will, crop up here and there. You can go and check out all of those. So, someone might post, hey, we're at Cabela's, or we're at Bass Pro Shops, or we're at Market Basket or Stop and Shop, or we're at the Town Dump. We're at such and such Sportsman's Club today. So those are kind of the one-day events that are popping up. But we're in 85 businesses right now. And a lot of them are non-sporting. They're bait and tackle. Well, I guess that's a sporting, but bait and tackle shops. We're in MMA gyms, we're in regular fitness clubs, we're in restaurants, uh, we're in automotive shops, so throughout the state. So if you go to that website, like you said, fightbackma.org, there's an interactive map and you can see the map of Massachusetts. There's pins in all the areas. You can go to your town and your place, where you live, and see what's closest to you. Click on one of the pins and it'll tell you if it's a 1-day event or if it's a, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, where you can go sign. A lot of them are daily. Whenever the business is open, they're there to take signatures. And you can also go to thecivilrightscoalition.com. It's thecivilrightscoalition.com. So you got to type out THE at the beginning or you won't get there. But and you can sign up to volunteer, to collect some signatures, to donate. And you can also see that interactive map on fightbackma.org where you can select a location to go sign.
It looks like there's pretty good coverage. Like you wouldn't have to drive more than 15 or 20 minutes in most cases to find a place to go and sign a petition.
Right.
So that's great. What about for people who are not registered to vote? Do you have links and where they should go to do that? Is there a website for them to go do that?
Yeah, I don't remember the website where to register to vote. I should know that off the top of my head, but I know you can do it at your local town hall.
Yeah.
And it might even be on the Civil Rights Coalition website.
Yep.
Let me see if it is.
And you can just type in "register to vote Massachusetts" in Google, and it's a small ask
right.
to ask you guys out there who aren't registered and who would like to sign the petition. Go to Google. It's very simple. Or go down to your local town hall, register to vote, and then find one of these locations to go and sign that petition. Is there any way to know? Have you heard? Do you know how many signatures so far that are out there, ballpark or anything like that? Any progress updates on that?
Yeah, so we just went through a swap last night up at the Gun Owners Action League Westboro office, and I'm happy to report that I can confidently say we will be on the ballot in 2026 with the amount of signatures we have, and we have 2 weeks left. So if we keep on the trajectory that we're on, no one can fall asleep at the wheel here. We really need everybody to sign. Then we will be able to suspend this bill. But we need everybody to get involved. We need you to bring your friends, neighbors, enemies, coworkers, and family to sign. This should be an easy ask, as you mentioned, because of the amount of sportsmen and gun owners in this state. Like we could do this all on our own, but I would say we're in bonus territory with lots of people who aren't even gun owners that have come and signed, families and friends and neighbors and relatives and whatnot. So that should make it that much easier. And we have some other non-government organization groups that are not necessarily sportsmen per se. They do get activated politically from time to time, but they're very much involved in getting signatures as well. So really, it's just waking people up because most people don't even know their rights have been totally destroyed by the legislature, and the implications of it haven't been fully realized because no one's woken up and been charged or had a run-in with the law. Or, just imagine people who are out duck hunting at 18 years old with their Super Black Eagle shotgun, this winter, and an EPO says, let me see your license to carry. Oh, here's my FID. Oh, you don't have a right to own that gun, and charges them with a felony. I mean, imagine that. That should never happen in this state. It should never happen in this country. And there's a bright line requirement for people to know where they stand in relation to the law. When you read this 116-page bill, oh my gosh, this is a mess. This is a absolute checkerboard of regulation that I'll never be able to understand. And I'm not a lawyer, it's lawyers don't even know. And so not to mention law enforcement who's been tasked with this. It's unfair everywhere around, all the way around. Also that politicians can do a victory lap. But yeah, it's a mess.
Well, anybody listening to this, I'm going to put the links to where you can find those businesses. We talked about it, but I'll put the links in the description here and on the YouTube video. I'll also find a link to where you can register to vote and put that down there too. And this is a call to action. Like and like you said, Toby, like I've got neighbors. I live in a very progressive town. It's a no discharge town for firearms. So all my hunting there is bow hunting. And as you can imagine, a lot of the populace is progressive. But I've got neighbors, and I've got permission from the neighbors to be able to hunt within 500 feet of their houses. And it's not just hunters. Like, though, I know I could go to my neighbors who know who I am as a person. They see I'm not this big, scary, Neanderthal hunter. Some of the negative stereotypes that hunters and gun owners can get, right? They see that I'm a real person, I'm a good person, and I challenge anybody out there who's got neighbors, and you might, even if you've never talked to them about hunting, just tell them about your passion. Tell them that what hunting means to you, what this bill could mean for hunting, and carpool down to one of these places and let's get the signatures. And like you said, don't take your foot off the gas pedal. Let's get way more of the signatures than we need, because they will go through those with a fine-tooth comb too, right? And they'll try to say, oh, this page has a smudge on it, or right, this was an illegible signature, and they're going to run it against registered voters, and they're going to find anything that they can to take some of those signatures out of there. So we probably need to be at 70, 80,000 signatures to be safe, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. That was our target. I mean, I would love to fire for effect and drop 150, 200,000 signatures on the Secretary of the Commonwealth, because that says a statement. You screwed up. Like, you really kicked the beehive. You kicked the hornet's nest here. And, people are fed up with being blamed for the problems of society that we have nothing to do with. And that's really what it comes down to is that's the way they treat it. Like, you look at what Michael Day wrote in the Boston Globe or the Boston Herald, I forget which article it was, but he basically said people move to Massachusetts because they can walk down the street without being menaced by people with guns. And he's inferring that the people who are lawful, peaceful gun owners are the ones that are committing the menace.
Yeah.
And nothing could be further from the truth, right? So, that's the part that has really charged up the base. It's charged up the people to get activated in this grassroots effort. This is something we can do to make our voice heard and actually do something in the state. Whereas normally every election you just cast your vote and you feel like it's not counting for something. But you touched on something that's very interesting, Patrick, and that is a very liberal, progressive side of the state. There's a lot of people who are gun owners as progressives and liberals. And, if they truly understood what this law implies, then they might actually sign the form and say, wow, that's not right. I talked to a family member who was very proud of this passing and was trying to rub my nose in it. And when I told him that Esther, my daughter, can no longer hunt with me with her shotgun, or the shotgun he wanted to give her, because he's no longer able to own it as of October 24th. He said, well, then I'll give it to Esther. And I said, you can't. She's 15. You can't. Like, it's not going to work. And so he said, well, that's not right. And I said, hello, I know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And so this is what you get when you're not paying attention. So we can make inroads. And as hunters, as gun owners, as sportsmen, we expand the tent. Maybe people don't care about hunting. They don't care about guns. They don't care about self-defense, but they care about their constitutional rights. And when you show how easily they were violated, and if even if it's about an issue that they don't care about, say all it takes is another administration to come in and start attacking the rights you care about.
Yeah.
And so, that's how we make some changes and how we get some people across the way to come to our side as far as this is concerned.
Now let's fast forward and say that we get the right amount of signatures, they're verified, and we're on the ballot in When would we be on the ballot in 2026?
Yeah.
Okay. So from that would put a pause to this until 2026?
Yes. Now, there is the possibility that Maura Healey will sign an emergency preamble. And that would be basically, think about, somebody who says all the time, she's a member of the party that says that everything is a threat to democracy. And now here's the people in Massachusetts participating in the democratic process under Article 48 of the state constitution. We are literally part of the constitutional process. That would then say, hey, they suspended a law that I signed. I'm not going to let them do that. So I'm going to go back and sign an emergency preamble that will suspend or that will rescind the suspension of this law. I don't think that's a very good look for someone who's running for governor in 2026. And I think that's a very bad look. And if you're encouraging people to be a part of the democratic process or the constitutional process, and I think it's a total tyrant move to do that. I don't think she'll do it. But if she does, then we're just going to have to challenge in the courts. If she doesn't, then it'll be on the ballot in 2026. That gives us 2 years to do something that the legislature did not afford us, which is to discuss the nuance of this bill. They came out of conference committee on July 17th at 8:30 p.m. and it was signed into law by the House and the Senate by 2 or 2:30 p.m. the next day, less than 24 hours later. Then less than a week from then, Maura Healey signed it into law. So the point I'm trying to make is we would do something that the legislature did not allow us to participate in, which is a discussion of what's in this bill. And that is what we would have for the next 2 years, is an open and honest discussion. Oh, you want to solve crime and you think that restricting 18-year-olds from hunting with a semi-automatic shotgun is going to do that? Or what are you trying to do here? What is the end goal? What are you trying to accomplish? I think if enough people see that, they'll say, this is a dumb law. This is really bad. It's antithetical to the Constitution. It's repugnant to the Constitution and should be, therefore, mooted and made void. So that's what we'll do. We'll start a 2-year campaign to alert people what has happened and that their laws have been, their constitutional rights have been violated. So that's really what it is. Now, if we lose on election day in 2026.
That was my next question. Yeah. What would happen there?
What happens there is we still challenge in court, because here's the thing that people don't realize, Patrick. I hinted at it earlier, and that is the legislature lacks the constitutional authority to violate our constitutional rights. They literally can't do it. There's a lot of Supreme Court precedent. The Federalist Papers, Madison wrote in Federalist 49 about constitutional limits, and that the legislature is the most important branch of the government because they're numerous and they're of the people. They're the blood of the people, and they are there at the State House or in Capitol Hill as the confidential guardians of the rights of the people. So they're there to be the gatekeeper of our rights. They're there to make sure that the executive branch and the judiciary don't overstep their bounds, and they're there to safeguard our rights. Well, somewhere along the line, they have flipped the script, and now they think they are the oath. They think that they are the grantor of rights. They're not the grantor of these rights, so they can't take them away, but they think they are. And so as a result, that's what we're trying to call attention to. Now, conversely, the people can't vote away our rights either. And it happened in Oregon under ballot initiative 114. They passed very similar legislation on a ballot initiative, and a court stepped in and said, you can't do that. You have rights. You can't vote them away without a constitutional amendment. So that's the only way that they could take away your right to keep and bear arms, is through a constitutional amendment. And that's a very high barrier to get that done. And they can't do it in this state even with the hypermajority that the state has. So the same is true for the people. We can't vote away our rights. You can't just say, I don't want the right to vote. I don't want the right to keep and bear arms. I don't want the freedom of speech. I don't want freedom of religion. You can't do that. And so even if people vote their rights away on election day, it'll be challenged in the courts and it'll be overturned. So a lot can happen in 2 years before the election. I think a lot of this law will be mooted in the courts already. And, it's not going to stand the test of time in the courts.
So in those 2 years, will there be will they have the opportunity to write the bill differently or write it or it'll stay exactly the way it is for 2 years? Or is there, through the conversations that we can have in those 2 years, will they have the ability to like make an amendment to that and change the way that it's written?
Anything's possible. I mean, that's what this whole bill did, was it changed Chapter 140 of the Mass General Law, right? So it was kind of a remove and replace of the existing Mass General Law. So they could just do the right thing and rescind this whole thing and say, we're passing a law to repeal Chapter 135 of the Acts of 2024. They could do that. And they could, make things right by the people. And will they? I highly doubt it. But they could. Anything's possible. They got 2 years of a full-time legislature to do that, to make things right. And will they? I don't know. But they could, and they should. And we've called upon them to do that, to rescind this whole bill. It is bad law, and it is unconstitutional, and you violated your oath of office to pass it, which should be which should be an automatic ticket home, if you ask me. Because think about the implications of that. Like, if you swear an oath, a sacred oath, I might add, to uphold, defend, and protect the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, and then you yourself become the enemy of the constitutional rights of the people by going in and being flagrantly against the Constitution that you just swore an oath to protect. That in the private sector is called fraud in the inducement. If we entered into a business contract and I did that to you, there would be such severe punitive penalties against me that, and rightfully so, that the courts must double the damages and can triple the damages. That's how important it is. But yet, when the legislature does it, they take a victory lap and they hold a press conference and say they're doing something to make our streets safer, even though they're not. And even though it doesn't hold anybody who's actually responsible for violent crime accountable. In fact, I would argue that the blood is on their hands for every negative outcome of the firearm, because they haven't dealt with this problem correctly for decades. And blaming the people who aren't responsible is just the definition of insanity.
And that is what they are saying. The bill is being written, that law is being written for that reason, to decrease gun violence in Massachusetts.
Yep. They, if you read every press release and newspaper article that's been written about this, for the most part, they will all say, oh, it strengthens our red flag laws and it, takes ghost guns off the street. Those are the only two subjects that they talk about. This is a 116-page document. The ghost gun is 10 sentences that they talk about.
Yeah.
It's a drop in the bucket. And if you really think that you're constitutional in being able to restrict lawful people from building their own firearm, then do that as a separate standalone bill. And it's not something that needs every aspect of our lives messed up over for that. Like, you could have done those two things as standalone bills.
Yeah.
And not destroy every aspect of firearms ownership in the state.
You there?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, just lost you for a quick second.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Probably somebody from the government tapping in and cutting off the internet connection. Yeah, no, I think I don't know where you left off or where I lost you, but I think we've pretty much touched it. It's a call to action to everybody. I really appreciate you coming on, Toby. You educated me on a lot of this stuff that I wasn't familiar with. it sounds like we're on a good trajectory. We just got to keep that trajectory up with the signatures, and let's once we do put a get this on the ballot, we have that 2 years to talk things over and make our voices heard more. We should definitely do something at Huntstock next year. We have 3,000 hunters. A lot of them are from out of state, but probably 66% of them are from Massachusetts. We can have some good discussions there. And I wish Huntstock happened, I think, a week or 2 weeks after this Maura Healey signed it into law. So we didn't have enough organization to get a signature event happening there. We could have got a couple thousand signatures right at Huntstock, but either way, let's keep up the pressure. And I just really appreciate you coming on and telling everybody about it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime. If you want to, hear how things are going, or you have any questions for me, by all means, reach out. And thanks for pushing out the information there, because a lot of people have no idea what happened. And they can go to thecivilrightscoalition.com or fightbackma.org to find out more about it, more about our efforts, to donate, to volunteer, where to sign. That's what'll get us to the finish line in a couple of weeks.
Awesome. Yep. So and I'll put those links down in the bio and the descriptions. And after at the end of October, why don't we do another? We'll get back together and give people an update on how things are going. I think that would be great.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks,
thank you very much, Toby. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Take care.